we begin our experiment, it is important to get all of our materials together. Here, we will only need 4 materials. The first is a glass jar of any size. The second is liquid-based food coloring. The third is oil. For this experiment, I will be using vegetable oil. And the fourth item will be water. It is important to note that for this activity, measurements of the oil, food coloring, and water do not necessarily matter, as you will be filling your container 3/4 of the way with water, as seen here, and the rest filled with oil. Now it's time to start the lab. Step 1 will be to fill your glass jar 3/4 of the way with water. Step 2 would be to carefully pour in your oil and try to avoid spilling. Now, once we've waited for the oil to settle on top of the water, we can see here the prime example of how oil and water do not mix. Here, because oil has a lower density than water, it will sit on top. For this experiment, the food coloring, which is water-based, will have a higher density than both the oil and the water, which will cause it to sink. Now that we have observed that the oil and water will not mix, it's time for step 3, which is to put a few drops of our food coloring inside of our solution. Here, it's important to see that the food coloring drops sink to the bottom of the oil, getting ready to pierce through the barrier and into the water. It sinks to the bottom of the oil because it is water-based and of a higher density. It's also important to note that the droplets will not mix with the oil because they are water-based. Oil, naturally, is hydrophobic, which means that it will not like water and it will not bond with water. So now it is a waiting game, waiting to see when the droplets will drop and form our fireworks. When they do drop, we will be able to see their trails as they sink to the bottom. Because there's more in our food coloring droplets than just water, their density will be higher, so they will sink to the bottom and create a firework effect. Once the bubbles burst, you can see their trail and their firework effect. Here, their firework will spread into the water and it will bond with the other water molecules. Because, since it is water-based, water will tend to attract other water molecules. Don't forget to have fun with this experiment and try a bunch of different colors. This way you can see the effect from multiple angles and get different kinds of fireworks. Here, with this experiment, you can get fireworks all year round, and don't just have to wait for July 4th. Here is a quick recap of the experiment. We started with oil and water and showed how they don't mix because they have different bonds. Oil here is nonpolar, so their charges are shared equally. Water is a polar molecule, so it has partial charges, and it will bond with other partial charges, meaning that it will have 2 different ends, positive and negative. A positive end will want to bond with a negative end, and a negative end will want to bond with a positive end. Here with this experiment, we are demonstrating how because there are 2 different molecular structures between oil and water, they will not mix together. And food coloring, which in this case is a liquid and water-based, here it will have a higher density and it will sink to the bottom. We can also witness that since it is water-based, water molecules will want to bond with water molecules. So here, they mix at the bottom.